Hello again, everybody. Diamond Jim's 45 here, and welcome back to the channel as always. Thanks for hanging in there with me. It's been maybe about 9-10 days since I've brought anything up to YouTube, and thought I'd do a player profile today, since I haven't been making any purchases at shows or at shops nearby, or haven't been watching anything on eBay that closely already. And here it is. Golly, we got about 7, 8, 9 months till the National next year in Chicago once again. And I'm already sort of a saving mode, not full-blown saving mode, but sort of a saving mode. Of course, if I see something that I just can't pass up, I'm going to have to go get it. But right now, things are kind of out of hold. So I thought I'd do a player spotlight on one of my 4 players that I collect, along with Lou Brock, Stan Musial, and Bob Gibson. Thought I'd do a player spotlight on Curt Flood, center fielder for the Cardinals, played in the major leagues from 1956 through 69, and then played 1 year with the Washington Senators, part of 1 year with the Washington Senators in 1971. Curt was born in Houston, Texas in 1938. At a young age, he and his family matriculated to the Oakland, California area, and where he went to high school. An interesting fact about Curt's high school, when he played baseball there, the other 2 outfielders were Frank Robinson and Vada Pinson. And what brings them all together is all 3 of those guys were not born in California. Vada Pinson was born, I believe, in the Memphis, Tennessee area. And Frank Robinson was born down in part of Texas where my mother is from. Frank Robinson's from the Beaumont area in Texas. Anyway, Curt had a handful of bats for the Reds in 1956 and 1957. I think those 2 years total, he had less than 10 at bats, and he was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals organization after the 1957 season. He played from 1958 to 1969 in St. Louis, and like I said, he played for the Washington Senators in 1971, who, by the way, were managed by Ted Williams. In 1971, on opening day, Curt was already 33, and he had been out of baseball for a year. He was a little bit out of shape, but on opening day, he played center field, and he went 1 for 3 with 2 walks. But it got steadily a little worse for Curt after that, and only played a handful of games for the Senators in 71, and then he was out of baseball. In the offseason of 1969, he was traded, among other players, to the Phillies, and he refused to report. And what was important about that trade was that was the trade that the Phillies sent Dick Allen over to the Cardinals, and he had that 1 year where I believe Dick hit like 34 home runs in the old configuration of Busch Stadium with the 414 in center field. And Dick was hurt for basically all of September. So he still had a pretty good season as far as the home runs were concerned. But anyway, it was the offseason trade to the Phillies that he refused to report to, and it started a whole chain of events. Curt sent a letter to the commissioner at the time, who was Bowie Kuhn. He demanded to be a free agent. He said he should be able to contact other teams and work out a deal with other teams, and that the reserve clause violated antitrust laws, and it just wasn't just, and he shouldn't be treated like cannon fodder from one team to the other. Later, the next year, he was supported by the Major League Baseball Players Union and a young Marvin Miller, who was in the Hall of Fame, and he filed suit in federal court claiming that the reserve clause violated antitrust laws. And the case finally got to the Supreme Court in '72. And his lawyer in front of the Supreme Court at that time was a former Supreme Court Justice, Arthur Goldberg. They challenged the 1922 decision, which was Federal Baseball Club versus the National League, basically the Federal League against the National League. They challenged the 1922 decision, which gave baseball its antitrust exemption. That's easy for me to say. And even though, he made that plea against antitrust, for a law at that time that was 50 years old, the Supreme Court ruled against Curt 5-3. I think one judge must have called in sick that day, but basically the court called baseball an anomaly. And as far as the antitrust exemptions were concerned, and they basically, the court did, kick the can down the road and said, if this has to change, Congress would have to change it. But even losing, 5-3, it strengthened the Major League Baseball Players Association and public opinion, highlighting the unfairness of the reserve clause, and paved the way for the 1975, here it is, 2025, 50 years down the road, the arbitration cases of Dave McNally and Andy Messersmith, which basically ended the reserve clause and ushered in free agency. So a lot of these guys, all these guys that attempt free agency and sign a contract as a free agent have Curt Flood to thank for it. Anyway, Curt was a 3-time All-Star. He played in 3 World Series, winning 2. He hit over 300, qualified 300, 502 at-bats. Hit over 300 5 times, and hit 335 in 1967. He hit Gold Gloves every year from 1963 to 1969 at center field in the National League. Later in life, this whole process took a toll on his health and such. Curt had, somewhat of an alcohol problem and lived elsewhere across the pond. I believe he lived in Spain. Did a lot of artist work. He was a very good artist, and he was a very good artist even during his playing days. He used to draw portraits of Mr. Bush in St. Louis all the time, and was really very good. He came back to the States in later in life and died at the age of 59 in Los Angeles. And back in the early 60s, it was Curt Flood who broke the news to Mr. Bush, owner of the Cardinals at the time, that in spring training in Florida, the black players couldn't stay in the same hotel as the white players. And Mr. Bush was unaware of this and started looking around at hotels in the St. Petersburg area that would take black players along with white players, and he couldn't find any. So finally, Mr. Bush bought a hotel, and it was called, at the time, I believe it was called the Windjammer Hotel. And it had been known under 2 other names before it was the Windjammer, and I believe it is some iteration of that hotel is still standing now in St. Petersburg. But it got to the point where, and Mr. Bush did not know this, got to the point where Ken Boyer and Stan Musial left the hotel and went and started staying at the boarding houses that the black players were staying at as kind of a silent protest. But it finally got all straightened out by Mr. Bush because he bought a hotel. He could not find a hotel that would take everybody in, so he just bought one. And a lot of this it worked out well because the hotel was big enough for the players and their families, including kids, to stay there during spring training. And they would have the Latin players would have a night where they'd have a big cookout and would be all Latin American type cuisine. And then the black players would have the same night, another time of the week, and would have like, I guess, soul food, that type of cuisine. And then the white players would have one night too where they'd host the barbecue. So it built a lot of team unity, which helped out a lot down the stretch, especially in 1964, where down the stretch, they came out of nowhere to win the National League pennant and then went on to win the World Series. So interesting story. Excuse me. Interesting story behind the Curt Flood autograph here. I bought that in St. Louis, and it was the right place at the right time. You've probably heard this story before because I've told it on YouTube before. I went to a fellow's table, and he was working out a deal with another guy, so I just kind of stood there and kind of out of the way a little bit, but within earshot. I don't want to step on a sale or anything. And finally it became an argument between the dealer and the customer. It was going to be an electronic payment, not cash. And they finally couldn't agree on who was going to pay the fees and that type of thing. So the deal did not go through. I don't know if it was about this piece or not. I don't think it was. But anyway, I walked up to the dealer's table and saw this piece, knowing that he had just had a deal fall through because of technicality, so to speak. So I gave him a very, very low ball offer on this. And he said one word: cash? And I said one word also: absolutely. So that deal was made, and I'm glad I got it. The cut autograph here, yeah, it's about, I haven't checked lately, but I would say at the time it was about 1/3 the price of a Curt Flood signature on a baseball. But, I'm happy with it. It has a nice place in my collection, and there you go. Now let me show you. I have 3 cards of Curt in my collection. And, I should have more. The Curt Flood cards are, honestly, really affordable. There's the high numbered 62 in an 8. And here's the, excuse me, coming off a cold, folks. Here's the 64 that you hear stories about, which are basically true, that some guy tried to buy up every copy he could find of the 64. And he had like 4,000 copies of it, but I found this one. Excuse me, folks, once again. And I have the 67 in an 8.5. God, I hope you enjoyed this. Hope to do more player spotlights, or I'll do more player spotlights if I don't have anything new to show as far as pickups and that type of thing. And some of these show reports will only be about guys that have one card, but each show report will be about a guy that I have at least, player spotlight will be about a guy that I have at least one card with. So, golly, everybody, thanks for watching. If you've stuck around this long, hope this wasn't too much like school. And golly, click like, click subscribe, please leave a comment, and so long for just a while.